Scotland are out of Euro 2024, once again failing to get out of the group stage at a major tournament. This exit felt different to 2021. This felt like abject failure. Whilst yes, we had injuries to many key players such as Ferguson, Hickey and Dykes, we were simply not good enough in a group that we could and probably should have progressed from. The thing is, there are other countries that are smaller than us that have made it out of the group stage, so this begs the question, are Scotland underachieving? Well, that's what this video will look into, as we compare Scotland to some other countries that you can consider to be overperforming, what issues we have as a country, and what changes could be made to help improve our game. Now, there are multiple ways to decide if a country is overachieving or underachieving. Brain for Breakfast made an excellent video detailing how to win the World Cup, with one of the main points being population. Scotland has a population of about 5.5 million people, similar to Slovakia and Norway. In the world rankings, according to the valuable source of information of Wikipedia, we would be 120th in the world. Of course, when it comes to using population, there are caveats such as diaspora population and those living in a nation not being able to represent said nation. But if you were to go by purely population numbers, Scotland are overachieving as we are 39th in the FIFA men's rankings, as of the June 20th ranking that is. Of course, that's not the only factor when it comes to how good a team is at football. Again, referencing the Brain for Breakfast video, there are other factors such as wealth and importance of football in society. It makes sense then to compare ourselves with Europe, as it's the continent that we are in, most countries are wealthy, and have football as their number one sport. Population-wise, we would be 29th, but if there was a separate ranking system for UEFA countries only, we would be 21st. So compared to our peers, we are probably performing as expected, but this doesn't mean we should be content. We all know the FIFA rankings aren't a perfect method of how good a team is. I mean, we've seen Belgium being at the top end for so long, despite not winning anything. But it can show how a team is performing over a long period of time. There are some countries who, relative to their size, are massively overperforming. Croatia have 3.8 million people and sit 9th in the world rankings. Iceland may have fallen down to 70th recent years, but considering they have 400,000 people, is still impressive. And Denmark have a population of 5.9 million and sit 21st in the world. So it is possible for Scotland to break into the top 20 and become a side that can actually make it out of group stages at competitions. So what do these countries do differently than us? Well, there's multiple issues, but the first one I want to bring up is the use of domestic players. When it comes to the amount of foreign players in the squad, Scotland is closer to England for reliance on foreign talent than the countries that I am comparing us to. According to transfermarket.com, for the 23-24 season, foreign players made up 58.6% of players in the Scottish top flight, 44.3% in the Danish Superliga, 32.8% for the Croatian League, and just 14.9% of players in Iceland's top flight. Of course, being neighbours of England, home to the richest league in the world, does mean that foreign talent will be more likely to come to Scotland in the hopes of getting snapped up by an English club who will pay them big wages. But it does show a lack of opportunity for young Scottish players. If we break this down to the big clubs in each respective country, starting off with Scotland again, foreign players make up 78% of Celtic's squad, 70% for Rangers, 51.8% at Hearts, 66.6% at Aberdeen, and 77.8% at Hibernian. In Denmark, Copenhagen's squad is 53.2% foreign, Nordsjælland 42.8%, and Midtjylland 66%. Over in Croatia, both Dinamo Zagreb and Hajduk Split have 37% of their squad made up of foreigners, with Rijeka sitting at 35%. And finally in Iceland, you can count the number of foreign players in both squads with one hand. In this season's Scottish Cup final, there were only 3 Scottish players out of a possible 22 in the starting lineups, all 3 being for Celtic. In the Croatian Cup final, there were 7 foreign players on the pitch to begin with, same number in the Danish final, and in Iceland there were 9 foreign players. Even the English FA Cup final, the country where the top flight is one of the most cosmopolitan in the world, had 7 English players in the starting lineups. So how do we combat this? This is where I get to use Football Manager for something useful, as when it comes to different nations, you will have different squad registration rules and matchday squad rules. In Scotland, there are no rules. There's no rules around the use of foreign players or domestic players. In Croatia, a match squad must have 6 players trained in Croatia, along with having no more than 6 non-EU players. In Denmark, your squad of 25 players must have 8 players trained in the country for 3 years before the age of 21, with a minimum of 4 players being from the club itself. Icelandic rules mean there can only be 3 non-EU players in the starting 11, along with similar rules around squad registration as Denmark, but with 8 players being trained at the club. And finally, a country whose rules I have become quite familiar with is Poland, where, in the Ekstraklasa, if players who are under the age of 22 and are Polish don't get a combined 3,000 minutes throughout the season, the club will get a fine of about £275,000. Squad registration rules are similar to Denmark as well, but in Polish cup games, there must be an under 22 player on the pitch at all times. Whilst of course UEFA competitions have their own squad registration rules that clubs that do qualify for have to abide by, surely it makes sense for the Scottish Premiership to take some of these measures and apply them domestically. Of course, there will be people saying, but the youth players aren't good enough, which is where coaching and infrastructure do come in. Iceland is probably one of, if not the best examples in how to create footballing infrastructure, especially in a country that has somehow got worse climate than us. Since 2000, Iceland has built 7 full-size indoor Astros, 6 half-size indoor Astros, 24 outdoor full-size Astros, 6 half-size Astros, 154 mini Astros, and 148 full-size grass pitches. This now means that Iceland has 1 full-size pitch for every 1,800 citizens. These pitches aren't limited to just the greater Reykjavik area either. You can go on Google Maps and find a village with 500 people with one of these mini Astros alongside a grass pitch, or towns with 1,500 people with an indoor pitch. This is in a country with a population the size of Fife. So it would be like Ladybank having a large indoor Astro instead of the only one being in Glenrothes. If we were to keep that ratio, Kirkcaldy should have 28 full-size pitches. A rough count suggests there's only 18. Iceland also made massive investments at coaching at every level, even at village youth teams. In 2003, not a single coach in Iceland had a UEFA B licence. Now, there are 669 coaches with one. 240 have got an A licence and 17 have a pro licence. These coaches are also paid to work as coaches, so they're not just a local parent volunteering whilst running around with their children's mates. Well, I mean, they probably are, but you know what I mean. It is a requirement to have a coaching education licence, even if you are to be an assistant at a youth club. But the Icelandic Football Federation would subsidise the cost of gaining these licences. For context, in Scotland, the cost of attaining a UEFA B licence is £2,250, with an A licence costing £3,000. If you want to go over the border to England to do the UEFA B licence, by the way, it will cost you £1,200. This is after an increase in price for the first time in 4 years, by the way. SFA, what are you playing at? How are we meant to improve as a footballing nation if coaches can't afford to get higher qualifications? The English FA also offers discounts or partial funding between 15 to 85% of the cost, whereas the SFA don't, providing a further barrier to entry. This barrier to entry is what is going to be a problem now and in the future if things don't change. As previously mentioned, the amount of pitches is potentially lacking and more aren't getting built. Whilst new schools will be built with an Astro pitch, good luck accessing them. From my experience, not even 10 years ago, you could access these pitches by simply going up and paying £1 and you're on for as long as you want, or until someone has booked it. Even going through to Burnt Island with friends, you could go to the kiosk and pay £1 and you got a wristband saying you've got access for the day. Those opportunities are gone now for most people, with councils only taking bookings for pitches. Having gone onto just about every single council website to see what the prices are for booking an Astro pitch at a leisure centre, The average price for a full-size pitch is £70.91 an hour. The cheapest being Shetland at £29.70 and Clackmannanshire being the most expensive at £145.50 for an hour. It is no wonder that the prices for club memberships are on the rise at all levels, and we see youth clubs either folding or losing members as they cannot afford to pay. Unfortunately, this next point isn't something that can be controlled by footballing authorities, but it's more of a look into wider society. You often hear people from older generations complain that kids don't play outside anymore as often. But why is that? Have a look at pictures of people playing in the streets from, say, the 1960s. What do you notice? There's no cars. Kids can't play in streets like they used to, as people are more concerned about their cars, which have also gotten a lot bigger in recent years, making them more unsafe for people that aren't inside them in the event of a collision. So, if kids can't play in the streets, why don't they play in a nearby park? Have you seen new build estates? It's just housing. There's no parks being built. Even then, sometimes it's just a small gated playground. There's also economic factors affecting kids' participation in football. As I mentioned earlier, the costs of hiring pitches have been rising, so costs for memberships have been rising as well to cover this. You know what hasn't been rising? Wages. The Resolution Foundation recently published a study showing how, if we account for inflation, wages in the UK as a whole have increased by £16 per week or £832 a year since 2010. If wage growth had been at the level of Germany or the United States of America, people would be earning £3,600 a year more. When you factor in the rising cost of living in general, it's no surprise people aren't signing kids up to sports clubs. And it's not just people who are lacking money either, but councils as well. They are the ones who maintain the leisure centres, parks and pitches that people play on. Audit Scotland found the money that councils receive and the money they need has a gap of £585 million. A gap that is expected to rise to £780 million. How are councils meant to provide services if they are being forced to work with a budget that can barely purchase a Freddo? And of course, another point that all the people want to make is, children are playing too much video games or whatever. You don't think kids in Germany or Spain or whatever aren't playing video games? So what can be done to improve this situation? Things that can be done by footballing authorities will be what I believe the SFA and SPFL are able to control. The SFA seem to bounce between profits of over 2 million and losses of 750,000. So it could be possible to put forward some sort of subsidy towards coaching badges, something similar to the Icelandic coaching programme. The SPFL itself can implement some form of squad rules around the use of foreign players and ensuring Scottish players are getting the game time they need. Things that the SFA, SPFL or clubs can't control is a wider economy, housing development or council funding, and ultimately I don't have the answers either. Okay, for housing development it would be to build denser housing, reduce the amount of cars on roads and guarantee green spaces in new build estates, but I'm not an economist or political expert. There also needs to be a unified footballing style throughout the country. This is the route that Belgium went down after a disastrous Euro 2000, where, as joint hosts, they were dumped out at the group stage. The Belgian FA analysed 1,500 youth games at all levels, seeing what needs improved. They would switch to a more attacking style of football, which allowed greater individual responsibility and allowed the system time to bed in. The under-17s would play a game against France and lose 7-1. They stuck to the plan because they knew it was a long-term project. The next year, they beat France. 15 years later, they were number 1 in the world rankings. Scotland needs to look beyond the here and now and look towards the future generations. We need to stop being so reactionary, even though I'm probably contributing to it with this video, and give youngsters more time to bed in. We seem to be too quick at wanting youngsters to be world beaters off the mark. Maybe it's the fact that with the size of our leagues, you very rarely have dead rubber games. Would expanding the leagues to develop youngsters at the expense of the jeopardy that moments such as a split with its relegation groups bring be worth it? Personally, I would say so, but league reconstruction is a topic for another video. Anyway, that's all for this video, and I hope you did enjoy it. How would you improve Scottish football? Leave your ideas in the comments below. There might be ideas that you have that I might never have thought of. Liking, sharing and subscribing are of course always appreciated, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.